This is part 5 of the series. Chester Lee Wicker, August 26, 1986. He was found guilty of abducting a woman and burying her alive on a beach after her car broke down at a shopping center in Beaumont on April 4, 1980. Mrs. Nutt was kidnapped as she was on her way home. 18 days later, her body was discovered in a shallow grave on a beach in Galveston County. She was buried face down in the sand, and an autopsy revealed she was still alive. In a moment of wrath earlier on the day of his execution, Wicker smashed his electric fan, threw his effects on the floor of his cell, and stomped on them. On the 15-mile van ride from death row at the Ellis unit to Huntsville Walls unit, which houses the death chamber, he was reported as silent. Wicker made no final statement except to tell his friend and spiritual advisor Judith Lamblion, "I love you." There are no records of his final meal. Michael Wayne Evans, December 4, 1986. Evans was incarcerated on death row for the murder of a church pianist who was shot and stabbed to death while pleading with God to forgive her attacker. Elvira Guerrero, 35, was kidnapped and killed in June 1977 as she and her fiancé were leaving the church. The woman was shot twice, had a carpet knife slashed across her eyes and throat, and had $40 in church donations stolen. The fiancé, Mr. Garza, who was Mexican, was also slain after being shot many times with a .22 caliber handgun that Evans claimed he had previously stolen. A few days after they were reported missing, their bodies were discovered in a hayfield. Evans drove Miss Guerrero's car until he was taken into custody by the police 2 weeks later, and he had given the woman's watch to his girlfriend. His last words were, "I just want to say I'm sorry for the things I've done, and I pray that I'm forgiven. I don't hold nothing against no one. Everyone treated me pretty well, and I know this is not easy. I'm sorry." He refused to have a last meal. Richard Andrade, December 18, 1986. He stabbed the woman at least 14 times, essayed her, and then murdered her with his pocket knife in 1984. Andrade decided on pizza, pinto beans, Spanish rice, and cake for his last meal. He asked no one to be present when he was executed. His execution came only 25 months since he was imprisoned. Ramon Pedro Hernandez, January 30, 1987. He was on death row for killing a night watchman during a failed robbery. Prior to his execution, Hernandez seemed composed and mouthed the words "I love you" when his two personal witnesses, friend Pedro Velardes and common-law wife Velma Hernandez, approached the death chamber. When he was asked if he had any last words, Hernandez said, "Only to my wife, that I love her, and to my kids." Then he looked at his wife. "You know that I will always love you." That's it. When officials couldn't find a vein to put the needle in, the execution was delayed. Hernandez glanced at the ceiling after the deadly medication were given, and he took 2 deep breaths. 8 minutes later, he was dead. His last meal was of tacos, an enchilada, a jalapeno pepper, hot sauce, and coffee. Eliso Hernandez Moreno, March 4, 1987. Moreno was a spree killer who murdered 6 individuals in the Houston, Texas area. Before killing Texas Highway Patrol Officer Russell Boyd north of Hempstead on October 11, 1983, Moreno was out looking for his estranged wife, Esther Garza, when he killed her and his brother-in-law, Juan Garza, in College Station. Moreno killed 3 elderly people in Hempstead and kidnapped a family before being taken to Pasadena by them. Moreno was traveling with another hostage to the Rio Grande Valley when he was taken into custody by officers at a roadblock in Wharton County. On March 4, 1987, after just 3 years on death row, Moreno was executed at the Huntsville unit via lethal injection. His last meal was 4 cheese enchiladas, 2 fish patties, French fried potatoes with ketchup, milk, and lemon pie. Anthony Charles Williams, May 28, 1987. On June 1, 1978, Williams kidnapped 13-year-old Vicki Lynn Wright from a parking lot of a bowling alley in northeast Houston, where she was essayed and bludgeoned to death. His lawyers attributed his aggressive conduct to brain damage he sustained in a childhood mishap. They contended that Williams was not given a thorough medical evaluation or adequate legal counsel during the trial. Williams smiled as he leaped onto the gurney and was put to death by injection. Playing dominoes with guards, he remained composed while awaiting execution. He also read the newspaper and spent an hour or so with his brother and sister. He spoke on the phone with his mother for almost half an hour late that night. His final meal was a piece of fish. His last words were, "Mother, I'm sorry for causing you all of the pain. I want to thank all those who helped me. I thank you all." Elliot Rod Johnson, June 24, 1987. Joseph Granado, 67, was shot at close range after Johnson and 3 accomplices robbed his jewelry store on April 8, 1982. Johnson, a 26-year-old Port Arthur, Texas native, was found guilty in 1983 and given a death sentence. His execution was considered a botched execution, as it took nearly an hour because his veins were not suitable for injection after years of drug abuse. In his last day, he talked on the phone with his mother as well as with a female friend who was also incarcerated. His last words were, "I'm very sorry for bringing all the hurt and pain to everyone who loved me so much. I hope all my friends find it in their hearts to forgive me." John Russell Thompson, July 8, 1987. Thompson brought up the idea of carrying out an armed robbery when he, Fernando Guerrero, and Guerrero's friend, Christy Sparks Moore, gathered at another friend's home in San Antonio, Texas. Thompson and Guerrero tried to get a gun after Guerrero gave his consent. After their attempts failed, Guerrero sought Moore's help in covertly obtaining an automatic weapon that belonged to her stepfather from his house. To be sure he understood how to use the weapon, which had 3 safety systems, Thompson, who was somewhat experienced with weapons, maneuvered it. Guerrero handled the gun as well. The evidence does not specify which person disengaged the safety devices, Guerrero or Thompson. The firearm was put beneath Guerrero's car seat. The 3 then picked up Thompson's friend Esther Cervantes, who provided a pair of sunglasses and a bandana to be used as a disguise. Thompson took the group on a drive in search of a robbery location. Following an examination of a number of other locations that didn't seem like good targets, Thompson passed the Pioneer Store and Lock office. In his car, Thompson told the group that he had observed a woman counting money. Thompson encountered a pedestrian on Loop 410 after driving onto it due to the other cars parked at the establishment. Guerrero spoke to the pedestrian while Thompson slowed down. Thompson was then pulled over by a police officer and given a ticket for blocking traffic. Then, a little agitated, Thompson and his 3 friends went back to Pioneer Store and Lock. He left them in the car and then put on the disguise, grabbed the murder weapon, exited the vehicle, and entered the office. During the trial, Moore, who was hiding in the back seat with Cervantes, claimed to have heard a large bang before Thompson came out of the office. They drove off once he got into the car. There was no money, Thompson told the group, therefore he hadn't taken any. Additionally, he claimed that when he first arrived at the office and pointed the pistol at Mary Newport, the woman there had not taken him seriously and had even laughed at him. He leaped over the office counter and tried to drag her back into the office area to stop her flight when she later ran out of it throughout the doorway. He said that he did not believe he had hurt her and that the pistol had unintentionally discharged. Moore also testified that Thompson sobbed and repeatedly claimed that he had accidentally shot Mrs. Newport after learning of her passing from the media. The victim had a wound from a gunshot that entered the left side of her neck, cut her spine, and left the right side of her head in front of her ear, according to the autopsy. The physician stated in his testimony that he believed the wound was caused by a big caliber bullet that was shot from a distance of less than 2 feet, possibly as close as a few inches. According to a weapons examiner's testimony, Mrs. Newport was shot between 3 and 6 inches away. According to Ronald Ash, a friend of Thompson and Fernando Guerrero, he talked to Thompson and Guerrero about the robbery murder that had taken place the day before Mrs. Newport's death. They had tried to make a score and killed an old lady, Thompson informed him, but he did not explain that this was an accident. He spent his final day on death row on July 7, 1987, just like any other day. He spent the early morning hours with the jail priest after coffee and peanut butter biscuits. He had seen his sister and brother-in-law, Joetta and Robert Thorpe, his brother James Thompson, and his parents, John and Era Thompson, before the end of the morning. When Thompson arrived in Huntsville later that afternoon, he spent the remainder of the day with the chaplain and his lawyers. Thompson was put on the gurney in the death chamber at 12:04 a.m. on July 8. He was pronounced deceased at 12:20 a.m. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.